Well, a few weeks ago when I was at the X conference in Washington, D.C., Graham Hancock came up to me and introduced himself. He's been on the program before, but we had never met. Well, he's here now on Coast to Coast AM, and he's next. Graham Hancock has become recognized as an unconventional thinker who raises legitimate questions about humanity's history and prehistory and offers an increasingly popular challenge to the entrenched views of orthodox scholars. Graduating from Durham University, first-class honors in sociology, he then went on to pursue a career in quality journalism, writing for many of Britain's leading newspapers. Here he is, full program tonight with Graham Hancock on Coast to Coast AM. Graham, how are you?
I'm fine, George. How are you?
Likewise. It was great meeting you out there.
It was great, and what a wonderful event that was. Yes, it was fantastic to meet you, and I thought a lot of really intriguing ideas were aired at that conference.
Does it add to the program and to the interview when you know face-to-face who's interviewing you? I've always wanted to ask somebody that.
Yeah, it definitely does. When we've talked a few times on the phone, and you get to know the other person on the phone, but there's nothing like that face-to-face contact and actually meeting the person and seeing how that person is to really cement that connection, I think.
So true, so true, and it makes, I think, a more well-rounded conversation too.
It does. I mean, this is one of the great things about your show, that it has the feel, in a way, of a couple of old friends who are getting together to discuss important matters, and there's that kind of warmth and connection to it that actually, to be honest, you don't find on that many other shows.
Later on, you can give us updates on Fingerprints of the Gods, but you've got a new work out called Supernatural. Tell me a little bit about this, and how did we get into that?
Well, it was a strange process for me because, as you know, and perhaps some of your listeners know, over the last 15 years, I've been focusing on the possibility that there could have been a lost civilization, that there's a great untold story in our history and prehistory, and I've looked very much at the last sort of 10 or 12,000 years in that perspective, and really having finished with Fingerprints of the Gods and Underworld, where I took that quest underwater and spent 5 years scuba diving all around the world, I felt that I had reached the point where I wanted to venture into something a bit new, a bit different. And I really thought what I would do is go back and look at the mystery of human origins, go back much further, perhaps even millions of years. And this was the genesis of my book, Supernatural. But like all books, when you really start to wrestle with them and get to grips with them, you find yourself steered by the book itself in a direction that you did not expect to go. And that's what happened to me with Supernatural. I found myself steered in a complete... I thought I was going to be writing about, the missing link and more of a mainstream story of human evolution, but I found myself instead confronted by an extraordinary mystery and by a period of human prehistory which is truly strange and eerie. I mean, to cut a long story short, what I found is that most of the story of human evolution, certainly as it's accepted by mainstream scholars, is incredibly dull. In fact, I call it 6 million years of boredom, really, from the last common ancestor with a chimpanzee about 6 million years ago, through to anatomically modern humans slightly less than 200,000 years ago. And the boring behavior, the non-innovative thinking, the evidence that our ancestors could not think laterally or creatively, had no sense of the abstract. Weirdly, this continues even after they become anatomically modern, even after they look just like you and me, with the same brain size as we do. Their behavior carries on being, I think the word really is uninnovative. There is just no innovation. They get locked into rigid patterns of behavior and they never change it. And then really quite suddenly all over the world, somewhere shortly after 40,000 years ago, something really extraordinary happens to our ancestors everywhere. It's like a huge wave of enlightenment just sweeps across them. And in an instant, they become recognizable through their behavior, the traces of which they have left in the archaeological record. They become recognizable as us. We realize that we're dealing not with basically, 8 men who happen to look like us, but actually us, with the same sensitivities, the same feelings. It's all suddenly there at once, fully formed, as though somebody has turned on a light switch. And the greatest evidence for this really comes from two things. Suddenly, our ancestors start burying their dead, and they do so in a reverential way, and they bury with them items of food and water. This has never happened before. And what it tells us is that they have got to grips, they've grappled with the concept that some part of the individual survives physical death, that we are more than our physical selves, that something goes on. That concept is very, very clearly evident in their burials. And the second thing that happens exactly the same time, and it's difficult to say, which is cause or which is effect, or whether they're both effects of some other cause, is that they start creating the most majestic and extraordinary art. Which Picasso, when he first visited it at the Cave of Lascaux in France, he came out and admitted frankly to reporters, we have invented nothing. Those ancient artists knew everything that we knew, and they thought in abstract ways and created the most extraordinary images that are truly eerie. When you go into these underground caves in southern France and Spain and other parts of Europe, which go back, in some cases, 35,000 years, you find yourself in vast, echoing cathedrals of the spirit, which are decorated and painted in the most eerie and touching and poignant manner. Great beauty is unveiled before you, and they've used the rock face, and you almost get a sense that they're telling you that on the other side of the rock face is another world, inhabited by strange beings who sometimes appear in part animal and part human form. And sometimes, and we'll get into this, there are a number of examples of this, appear in a form that any of us today, familiar with the popular media, would recognize as a gray, as what we think of as the typical alien. There are a number of images, more than 25,000 years old, in the caves, which show that kind of figure very, very clearly and very distinctly. So this is all very weird, and at the same time, our ancestors' economic behavior starts to become much more sophisticated. Their hunting strategies are radically overhauled. They become incredibly efficient and cunning. Their weapons and tools take a quantum leap forward. So something has happened to them, and this is why the subtitle of my book, the title is Supernatural, the subtitle is Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind, because I cannot resist the conclusion that some encounter happened to our ancestors at that point that switched us on, that put us on a new track. And that's what I ended up focusing on, and that's what I ended up investigating, is what was it? What was that extraordinary moment in human history that made us fully human for the first time?
Your work somewhat similar to Michael Cremo's, or one could say Michael Cremo's work somewhat similar to yours.
Well, I would say that they're complementary in a way. Michael goes down some tracks that I don't go down. Michael has presented a huge amount of evidence for which I know Michael personally. He's a wonderful man, a fantastic researcher. Really has done the most incredible work, which I would recommend to everyone. And he has documented some quite a few strange and mysterious exceptions to the accepted evolutionary story, and suggested that actually anatomically modern humans may have been present on the planet much earlier, millions of years ago, not hundreds of thousands of years ago. Now, I don't go there in my book. Over the years, I've been obliged to spend so much of my time fighting with mainstream academics that about my own view of history, my own take on the possibility of a lost civilization, I found that and it almost seems like a strategy on their part, that I end up getting bogged down in these arguments with orthodox academics.
That's how they contain you, Graham.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how they contain us all, is that they pick some little quibble or niggle with your argument and then try to expand it out into something which they claim destroys the whole argument. And so instead of actually, you see, I see my role as advancing ideas that perhaps other people aren't advancing. I think the whole area of inquiry into what it is to be human is an open area. I don't think it belongs to a particular group of people.